Hello students, welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Rajeshwari Sinha, working as Program Officer at the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. Today, we are going to learn about the bioenergetics of enzyme reactions. In this module, we will study the energy systems associated with enzyme reactions. First, let me tell you what are the major objectives that we are going to address in this lecture. In today's lecture, we will focus on understanding what is bioenergetics. Bioenergetics is also linked with metabolism, and we will see what is the relationship between bioenergetics and metabolism. We will also understand the bioenergetics involved in enzyme catalyzed reactions which form a critical part of our metabolic cycle. In this slide, we will look at what are the objectives that will be covered in this lecture. There are three major objectives. First, we will see what are bioenergetics and metabolism. Next, we will look at how enzymes work and what are the bioenergetics involved. In the last part, we will look at why understanding of bioenergetics in enzyme reactions is important. The concept map in this slide shows the steps that we will follow in this lecture. First, we will see what is the linkage between bioenergetics and metabolism, the different types of chemical reactions like exergonic, endergonic, catabolic and anabolic reactions. We will see what is activation energy, the working of enzymes and importance of bioenergetics. Introduction. Let us begin by understanding briefly what are enzymes. Enzymes are protein catalysts which increase the rate of a reaction without themselves undergoing any chemical change at the end of the reaction. The rate of chemical reactions catalyzed by enzymes increases sometimes hundreds or even up to thousands of times. Since enzymes are not changed by the end of the reactions which they catalyze, they can be reused. Bioenergetics and metabolism. Bioenergetics is the study of flow and transformation of energy through a living organism and the environment. So, it is basically understanding of how energy flows through a living system. The organism needs energy for their physiological activities. In these activities, number of chemical reactions take place. In all these, energy is utilized or generated. Hence, transformation of energy in living system follows the law of thermodynamics. Now, we will understand what is metabolism. Metabolism refers to all the chemical reactions which occur within living organisms. Metabolism is therefore linked to bioenergetics because all chemical reactions involve energy transfers. Metabolic reactions can be divided into two categories: anabolic reactions, which are building reactions, and catabolic reactions, which are breakdown reactions. Let us understand these two reactions in detail. Catabolic reactions usually release energy during the breakdown of large molecules into smaller ones, and this energy is used to drive chemical reactions. Anabolic reactions, on the other hand, refers to chemical reactions in which simpler substances are combined to form more complex molecules. Anabolic reactions usually require energy. Anabolic reactions build new molecules and store energy. Continuation of bioenergetics and metabolism. Now, we will also look at two different types of chemical reactions, which are exergonic reactions and endergonic reactions. Exergonic reactions are basically catabolic reactions which release more energy than they require. It is spontaneous and thermodynamically favored. The energy that is released is called the Gibbs free energy, often represented by delta G as a symbol. For the reaction to be spontaneous and proceed in a favorable direction, the value of delta G should be negative because energy is lost from the bonds which are formed during the formation of the products. An example of exergonic reaction is the oxidation of glucose to yield carbon dioxide and water, and also there is a release of energy in the form of ATP. Now we will see what are endergonic reactions. These are anabolic reactions that consumes and or takes up energy. The value of free energy in this case is positive because in this case energy is required for breaking the bonds. An example of endergonic reaction is the combination of carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight energy to form glucose and oxygen. So, we see that here there is utilization of energy for bringing about this reaction. In this slide, we see a graphical representation of exergonic and endergonic reactions which we just studied. In the exergonic reaction, the delta G is less than 0, the reaction is spontaneous. In the graph, we see that the energy of the products is less than the energy of the reactants and the reaction can proceed easily. In the endergonic reaction, we will see that the energy of the products is higher than the energy of the reactants. Hence, delta G, which is the difference in the Gibbs free energy of the products and the reactants, is positive or greater than 0 and the reaction is not spontaneous. Activation energy. In order for a reaction to occur, the reactant molecules must have enough energy such that it is able to cross a substantial potential energy barrier that exists between the initial state and the final state of the reactants. This is called the activation energy for the molecules or energy of activation. The very short-lived energy rich state at the top of this barrier is called the transition state. If we look at the figure alongside, we will see that all these parameters have been diagrammatically represented. The transition state is the highest position of the energy graph, whereas the energy of the products is less than the energy of the reactants, and the difference in energy between the reactants and the transition state is the activation energy. The lower the potential energy barrier to a reaction, the more the reactants have sufficient energy to cross over this barrier easily, and hence faster will be the reaction and more easily the products will be formed. So students, we have reached midway into this lecture. We have understood what is bioenergetics, what is metabolism and how these two are linked. We also understood different kinds of reactions such as catabolic, anabolic, exergonic and endergonic reactions. Then we also looked at what we understand by activation energy. In the next section, we will move to understanding how enzymes work, the concept of activation energy in enzyme catalyzed reactions and what is the bioenergetics involved. Lastly, we will also look at the importance of bioenergetics. Now we will see at how enzymes work. There are two ways in which an enzymatic reaction can be brought about. One is raising the free energy of the substrates. Now let us understand how. If the free energy of the substrates is increased or the reactants is increased, the difference in energy between the substrate and the transition state reduces. Hence, the activation energy also declines and the potential energy barrier can be easily crossed. The second way to bring about a reaction would be the decrease in energy of activation of the reaction. If the activation energy of the reaction is lowered, the reaction will be spontaneously accelerated and proceed in the forward direction. Now let us look at how enzymes work and how enzymes help in lowering the activation energy of a reaction. This slide shows the energetics of a reaction, showing the role of an enzyme in lowering the energy of activation. We see that the energy of the products is lesser than the energy of the reactants, and in the presence of enzyme, the transition state energy is also lower as compared to the transition state energy which is achieved in the absence of the enzyme. Thus, the activation energy with enzyme is lower than the activation energy without enzyme, and the energy can be easily crossed in the presence of enzyme and the products are obtained. How enzymes work? Enzymes can act in several ways, all of which lower the activation energy represented by the symbol EA of the reaction. The various ways are discussed herein. Firstly, the correct orientation of the substrate, which implies that initial binding of the enzyme to the substrate takes place with the substrates lying in the correct orientation such that they are close to the catalytic groups in the enzyme for the reaction to occur. Another way in which enzymes can lower the EA of a reaction is by straining bonds in the reactions so that the bonds in the reactants easily break and products may be easily formed. A third way is the creation of an environment in which the transition state is easily stabilized. Further, enzymes also reduce or lower the transition state energy through the creation of a charge distribution that is opposite to that of the transition state. Importance of bioenergetics. In this slide, we will understand why understanding bioenergetics of enzymes is important. Understanding bioenergetics of enzyme catalyzed reactions find application in areas of both biochemistry as well as in areas of industrial enzymology. The data is often useful for the prediction of the extent of enzymatic reactions and the position of equilibrium for any reaction. Understanding bioenergetics is also essential for metabolic control analysis, which forms an important part of the systems category. We have now come to the end of this lecture. In this lecture, we have therefore understood the concept of bioenergetics that is involved in enzyme reactions. We have seen how enzymes work by lowering the activation energy or energy barrier of reactant molecules for the reactions to proceed in a favorable and forward direction. Now, let us briefly summarize what we have learnt in this lecture. Bioenergetics is the study of flow and transformation of energy through a living organism and their environment. Metabolism, which refers to all the chemical reactions occurring within living organisms, is therefore linked to bioenergetics because all chemical reactions involve energy transfers. Enzymes lower the activation energy of a reaction such that the reactant molecules are able to cross the energy barrier easily. Bioenergetics of enzyme catalyzed reactions find applications both in areas of biochemistry and in industrial biotechnology. Thank you for watching this lecture on bioenergetics of enzyme reactions.